Yes, this vid covers more raiders and more gangs. In the Fallout series, we've seen everything from sadistic human skin wearers to pre-war gangs like the Yakuza still existing in the present world. But when it comes to 76, raiders aren't as unhinged. Many of these groups on the list are obscure gangs that can easily get overlooked. Not because they aren't interesting, but because most of the gangs on the list are simply memories and the ghosts of the gangs that once lived in the Appalachia. Yes, this is still part of the current series on every faction in Fallout that we've been dropping every Tuesday. So if you love Fallout, then you are definitely in the right place. We have tons of Fallout content on the channel and a lot more to come, so consider subbing. It would mean a lot to Macer and I. Enjoy the video, guys. The Blackwater Bandits were one of the raider gangs in Appalachia, known for their skill in stealth. Rose even claimed they managed to infiltrate a Brotherhood of Steel armory and steal from it without ever being detected, a feat that gave them a reputation far beyond the usual raider gang. Their base of operations was Blackwater Mine, a pre-war government uranium mine that offered both shelter and resources. Their downfall, however, came from within. Before 2096, a gang member named Rob tampered with machinery in the mine while drunk, causing a radiation leak. The bandits began to grow sick with aches, weakness, hair loss, and peeling skin. Leader Freddie Lang at first thought it was a flu and turned to chems to help, but the illness only grew worse. When the truth came out, Lang executed Rob, yet the damage was irreversible. The lingering radiation wiped out the gang, with members either dying or becoming ghouls. To the rest of Appalachia's raiders, the Blackwater Bandits simply vanished, their fate a mystery. The Cutthroats are one of the 5 major raider gangs in Appalachia, led by David Thorpe with Rosalind Jeffries as his second in command. They were based at the Pleasant Valley Ski Resort, their name and logo taken from the Cutthroat Crag ski trail planned for the nearby Top of the World resort. Known for their violence, they gained infamy after the Christmas flood of 2082, when Thorpe, believing Rosalind was dead, ordered the disaster that destroyed Charleston. Their fate ties closely to the Scorched Plague. Evidence suggests that Cutthroats were overwhelmed by it, as their former territory is now overrun with Scorched, and Thorpe himself eventually became one of them. An unsent letter he left behind adds weight to this theory. After their fall, Rose took up leadership and continues searching for new recruits to rebuild the gang. The Diehards stood out from other raider gangs in Appalachia for trying to avoid killing innocents, believing there were other ways to get what they wanted. This philosophy earned them a reputation among other gangs as weak and soft, and when people resisted their demands, they sometimes killed anyway. The contradiction weighed heavily on their leader Margie, who eventually overdosed on chems, leaving Vincent to take charge. The gang eventually collapsed, their old territory overrun by super mutants, and many survivors scattered east into places like the Commonwealth and Washington, D.C. In 2103, the Diehards returned to Appalachia under Meg, who was one of their original members. Drawn back by Rose's broadcasts about hidden treasure, they reformed with other survivors and wastelanders they picked up along the way. Now, part of the Raider Alliance at the Crater, the Diehards are seen by others as Old Raiders, but their name and history give them recognition in the Toxic Valley and beyond. The Gourmands were one of the 5 major raider gangs in Appalachia, infamous for cannibalism. Other raiders called them freaks for their grisly habits, and the reputation only grew darker when they tried trading human flesh for goods with vendor bots, leaving behind a note that flatly confirmed their practices. They later settled at Bolton Greens, where their numbers began to dwindle as members mysteriously disappeared. Suspicion turned on their leader, Morris Stevens, when the gang found the half-eaten corpse of a member named Gregory in his room. Cannibalism was part of their way of life, but their code forbade eating one of their own. Morris and his wife Eddie were exiled, fleeing to the nearby Wendigo cave. There, Morris killed and ate her before fully transforming and evolving into a Wendigo. What happened to the rest of the Gourmands is unclear. Some stories claim they eventually ate each other despite their rules, while others suggest they were wiped out by the many dangers of Appalachia. Whatever the truth, their name has lasted as one of the most disturbing raider gangs in the region's history. The Trappers were one of Appalachia's 5 major raider gangs, known for their love of hunting and their skill with traps. They specialize in explosive bait, a tactic invented by a member named Chuck to throw off responder tracker dogs after raids. Their camp was set up near the Devil's Backbone just outside Huntersville, where they could watch the roads for travelers while still having access to game in the wilderness. Their leader, Walter Griswold, kept the gang focused on both raiding and survival. For years, they avoided Huntersville, fearing its quarantined water supply. But when they began hearing strange noises from the town, Griswold sent a scout and later went himself, only to discover it had been overrun by super mutants. He even witnessed the Brotherhood of Steel fighting them before retreating to warn the rest of his gang. The trappers then soon faced direct attacks from the super mutants. The first assault was beaten back, and Griswold sent a call for help to David Thorpe and the Cutthroats, but it never reached its mark or was simply ignored. A second attack proved devastating. Griswold and many of his men were captured and dragged into Huntersville. The survivors, including Chuck, felt abandoned by the Raider Alliance and eventually scattered, leaving the trappers broken and their name added to Appalachia's long list of lost gangs. The Blood Eagles are one of the most violent raider groups in Appalachia, appearing in 2103. Unlike the gangs that came together to form the Crater Raiders, the Blood Eagles were left out, their obsession with cruelty making them too unstable and too dangerous to cooperate with anyone else. They aren't just another raider gang, they're an army spread across the Ash Heap, Savage Divide, and Cranberry Bog, repurposing camps and bolstering their numbers with advanced weapons. To everyone outside the ranks, they're one of the largest and most hostile forces in the region. Their exact origin is debated. Some Wastelanders believe they came from old biker gangs, while Beckett, a former member, describes them as a group of criminals taken over by a ruthless clique from within. However they began, the leadership that emerged turned them into a cult-like force driven by hyper-violence. They're led by a group of 3 Raider Lords known only as the Blood, the Eye, and the Claw. This system ensures the gang can survive assassinations or infighting, since at least one of the trio will always remain to keep them alive. Even so, leaders are challenged constantly, and very few hold power for long. Recruitment into the Blood Eagles is built on addiction and abuse. They prey on chem users by offering spiked, hyper-addictive doses of Buffout, withholding it until the addict agrees to join. Sometimes they even force chems on captives to hook them and make them dependent. Most members stay in a haze, barely lucid, while anyone who shows strength or sobriety risks being tortured or killed in public. It's a terrible cycle of control that keeps the rank and file broken and loyal out of fear. The Blood Eagles also stand out for their tactics. They're skilled at taming creatures and hacking machines, giving them forces beyond just human raiders. They've taken over Watoga Underground's security robots, including Mr. Gutsies and Assaultrons, and regularly unleash attack dogs to harry their enemies. More recently, they've even been seen taming Mirelurks. Their camps are fortified with alarms that instantly alert the whole group and send out waves of attack dogs, making assaults on their bases especially dangerous. Their lifestyle is a strange mix of raider culture and warped ritual. Blood Eagles wear black leather and face paint, often decorating their camps with butchered rad stags or evidence of cannibalism. At Crimson Prospect, they've even set up music gear, with raiders playing instruments or singing to entertain themselves. It shows that beyond the constant violence, they built a culture of their own, bound together by blood, chems, and brutality. Individual leaders like Dagger and Tally Lang show how widespread and varied the gang's reach has become. Dagger led a faction in the mire, extorting villages like Jenny Brown's for supplies. Tally stormed Vault 96 with her crew, including Needles, 8-Ball, and Dillo, only to be trapped inside after a disastrous fight with Hellcats and mercenaries. Meanwhile, the Rust Eagles, a splinter of the gang, began hosting gladiatorial battles at the Metal Dome in 2104, with even Brotherhood warriors stepping into the arena for supplies. By 2105, the Blood Eagles were still expanding. Some set up outposts in Appalachia's northeast corner and even started trying to domesticate Mirelurks, while others fought off mole miners in abandoned mines like the Crosshair. Their sheer size, brutality, and lack of restraint set them apart from every other group in Appalachia. Where the Crater Raiders try to maintain power through numbers and alliances, the Blood Eagles exist purely to spread fear and violence, carving out their place as Appalachia's most notorious raiders. The Rust Eagles are a splinter gang of the Blood Eagles, founded by a raider named Buzzsaw. Unlike their parent group, they focus less on reckless violence and more on building and controlling robots. Buzzsaw gathered the best botsmiths from the Blood Eagles and turned them into a new faction with the Metal Dome as their headquarters. There, they refined their craft by holding robot pit fights, making combat both a form of entertainment and a proving ground. Compared to the Blood Eagles, the Rust Eagles are less hostile towards outsiders. While still dismissive, they maintain a working relationship with the Brotherhood of Steel's 1st Expeditionary Force at Fort Atlas. The Brotherhood's Gladiators of Steel unit takes part in the Metal Dome fights, using them as a way to test the Rust Eagles' capabilities without committing to all-out war. Honestly, not a bad idea. The Rust Eagles, meanwhile, assume the Brotherhood participates for the same reasons as anyone else: fame and fortune in the arena. The Free Radicals are a raider gang in Fallout 76, formed from a band of ex-cons freed from the Western Maryland Correctional Facility. Their leader, Roper, ironically a former prison guard, led them into Appalachia after hearing broadcasts about the rumored treasure of Appalachia. Once there, they seized the West Virginia Lumber Co. facility on the Ohio River. The site has been occupied by super mutants, but the gang wiped them all out, burning or dumping their corpses before fortifying the lumber mill as their new base. Lacking skill in farming or hunting, the Free Radicals sustain themselves by extorting nearby settlements like Anchor Farm, demanding food in exchange for protection. They also maintain a constant search for the treasure, with men working around the clock to find it. Their aggressive presence quickly made them a problem for the Wayward, pushing Duchess to enlist the Vault Dwellers' help to cut off their interference and keep her business alive. Edwin is a raider leader in Fallout 76 Wastelanders, known for being both intimidating and strangely well-liked. He sharpened his teeth into spikes to enhance his fearsome look, but those close to him like Beckett describe him as a good guy, unstable but respected by his gang. His crew included his niece Ronnie, Beckett, and Bronx, and they were one of the smaller but notable raider groups in Appalachia. His gang had a bitter rivalry with the Blood Eagles, beginning after they killed and skinned Edwin's pet cat, sending the pelt back to him in a sack. The feud then deepened as the Blood Eagles lured away members like Beckett. Despite this, Edwin's group survived long enough to join the rush into Appalachia around 2103, drawn by treasure rumors and the weakening of the Scorched Plague. By the time the Vault Dweller meets them, Edwin has suffered a string of setbacks. His diary was stolen by Beckett, his cash key was taken by Bronx, and his dog, Noodles, was kidnapped by a cult. Over the course of quests like Dirty Little Secrets, Out of Key, Pet Peeve, and Bot of Gold, the player helps restore his fortunes. But Edwin's health declines, likely due to exposure to the ash heap, forcing his gang to rely on a Miss Nanny robot for care. After the fight against the Blood Eagle leader known as the Claw in Thicker Than Water, Edwin steps aside, and Ronnie assumes leadership, ensuring her uncle a retirement that most raiders never live long enough to see. Sargento's gang is a raider faction in Fallout 76 Wastelanders, best known for running slavery and bloodsport out of the Watauga Civic Center. Founded after the Great War, they originally operated in the capital Wasteland before moving into Appalachia. One of their early members, Glenn, recalled joining as a child after trying to steal food from them, ultimately losing a fight to Sargento himself, but earning his respect and a place in the gang. In Appalachia, the group turned the Civic Center into a raider-run arena. Captured slaves are forced to fight dangerous creatures for the entertainment of the crowd, while Sargento pushes his crew to come up with new fight themes to keep things fresh. His notes to Carl, the gang's technician, show his offbeat ideas, like an arena match themed entirely around chainsaws. Brutal and theatrical, Sargento's gang combines the cruelty of raiders with the spectacle of bloodsport. The Fanatics are the dominant raider force in the Pit by 2103, a federation of gangs united under one mysterious warlord. Before their rise, the Pit was plagued by small, scattered raider bands who couldn't hold territory for long. That changed when this leader forged them into a single army, pushing to conquer the city through sheer numbers and brutality. Compared to the Blood Eagles of Appalachia, the Fanatics are far more organized, functioning less like a gang and more like a warband with specialized roles. Their method is simple: sweep in, kill anyone who resists, and enslave the rest. The war against the Union escalated sharply when the Fanatics hired the Hellcat Company in 2103. Though many Hellcats distrusted their employers, they stuck to their contract for 18 brutal months. Used as roving death squads, the Hellcats stormed Union outposts and slaughtered survivors, often alongside Fanatic raiders who were undisciplined and reckless. By the time their contract ended in 2104, the Hellcats had lost nearly half their numbers, and most survivors abandoned the Pit. Still, their support helped cement Fanatic dominance over much of the city. Once entrenched, the Fanatics turned places like the Sanctum into torture centers and slave pens. The catacombs became holding cells, and captives were broken down through abuse until they worked or died. Slaves were essential to the Fanatic war machine, used for construction, scavenging, and even as cannon fodder in raids. Quotas were deliberately impossible, and punishments ranged from slow torture to live burial. The Harrowers, one of their warbands, specialized in this cruelty, while the Manhunters gained notoriety for their skill in killing high-value targets and taking spoils by right of conquest. Their relationship with the Trogs was as twisted as everything else in the Pit. They could cow smaller packs through violence or intimidation, but no Fanatic was safe from being dragged away and devoured when vulnerable. Warlords even used trogs as a way to dispose of troublesome subordinates. To many slaves, the line between fanatic and trog blurred, with both embodying the horror of life in the pit. Despite their savage culture, the fanatics weren't without technical skill. They repurposed old industrial equipment and reprogrammed robots to fight for them, even turning protectrons into suicide bombers. Later, they expanded into chemical weapons, forcing their slaves to mix toxins in the foundry's crucibles in exchange for scraps of food or the right to live another day. These weapons were unleashed on the Union, but they burned through their slave stock even faster, threatening the faction's own survival. Inside the Fanatics, hierarchy was built on constant challenge. Any member could rise in rank by defeating another in a contest. Sometimes violent, other times as trivial as a board game. Leadership itself was structured around 3 figures: the blood, the eye, and the claw. This trio meant the gang could survive even if 1 or 2 leaders fell, though turnover was constant as power struggles ended in death. Survival skills, medicine, and long-term planning were all in short supply. Supplies were hoarded, antibiotics wasted, and most of the infrastructure they seized was reduced to war posts and prisons rather than being used for production. In the end, the Fanatics failed to hold the pit in the long term. By 2255, the city had collapsed into a toxic ruin, its people broken by radiation and chemical exposure. Whatever remained of the Fanatics was likely destroyed when Owen Lyons' Brotherhood of Steel launched the Scourge, a campaign that wiped out most of the city's population. From those ashes rose yet another raider power, who envisioned not just domination, but rebuilding the pit into a new industrial nation. The Revenants are a ghoul-only faction introduced in Fallout 76's Ghoul Within update, based out of Radiant Hills in the far north of Appalachia and the Savage Divide. Founded by Elmira, Maddox Mullen, and Kevin Asherton, the group was born out of tragedy. Originally part of Lucy's Ghoul Refuge at Valley Galleria, the founders split off to avoid persecution from Duncan McCann's hunters. Elmira later sacrificed herself during a raid gone wrong, distracting attackers so the others could escape. Her death inspired the survivors to build a new home for the ghouls, and they found it in an abandoned missile silo leaking radiation, a place perfect for them, if dangerous to outsiders. At its core, the Revenants are survivalists. They built Radiant Hills as a sanctuary where ghouls could live free from human discrimination and the constant threat of extermination. But survival has hardened them. They use masks and disguises to hide their identities, and when discovered, they kill to protect their secrecy. Outsiders brand them raiders, and while the Revenants admit to raiding and killing, they frame it as necessity, not cruelty. Asherton insists their violence is a response to the injustices ghouls have endured, while Maddox argues there should be no mercy for outsiders. This philosophy has given them the reputation of mass bandits, feared as much for what people don't know as for what they actually do. The faction is not without internal debate though. Asherton sees ghoulification as a curse and focuses on simply keeping his people safe, while others perhaps see it as a gift. Miss Blankenship even experimented with accelerating ghoulification through an inhaler tied to the leaking warhead at Radiant Hills, raising questions about whether the Revenants should protect only existing ghouls or actively create new ones. Recruitment has been bolstered by rumors of a radiation specialist in the mountains, drawing in desperate wanderers looking for answers. While these methods divide the group, all members agree on one rule: no witnesses. Survival depends on secrecy, and anyone who discovers who they are rarely lives to talk about it. Beyond Radiant Hills, the Revenants also oversee Point Repose, a vertebrate landing yard turned into a sanctuary for ghouls going feral. Asherton built it after one member began losing herself, giving her a place to retreat where she couldn't hurt others. It has since become sacred ground, a grove where members can walk through the last door when the time comes, locking it behind them as they accept their fate. The site also shows strange signs of radiation-fueled growth, with acidic soil altering local flora. Some members see it as a natural memorial, others as a scientific curiosity. The Revenants walk a narrow line between being seen as a raider gang and a community of survivors. To the outside world, they're killers hiding behind masks, raiding settlements and leaving no witnesses. To themselves, they're builders of a fragile sanctuary against a world that hates them, trying to hold on to dignity in a wasteland that offers little of it. Elmira's sacrifice still hangs over their story, showing us that survival often comes at the highest cost. As Mason mentioned in the last vid, he was moving this week, so hopefully I did a decent job covering these lost raider gangs. As for next week, well, we will move on to more factions. This series has been a fun one to cover, and we really appreciate you guys watching. Remember, enjoyed time is never wasted time, and we'll see you in the next.